The first glimmer of daylight that creeps over the Cotswold ridges seldom finds Princess Anne asleep. Even after half a century of public life, she is usually up well before 6, slipping from the warmth of the bedroom she shares with Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence and padding through the quiet corridors of Gatcombe Park in search of the day's first cup of tea. She brews it herself, Yorkshire Gold, 1 sugar, never milk, and stands at the kitchen window watching mist unspool across the lower paddocks. The estate's horses, still half drowsy, toss their heads as she passes the stable yard on her way to the tack room. If her diary permits, she rides 40 minutes at a brisk trot that clears the cobwebs and focuses the mind. Then it is back inside, a quick change into an immaculately pressed suit, and down comes the battered leather portfolio stuffed with briefing papers, speech drafts, route maps and the day's seating plans. By 8:15 a.m. the Jaguar is nosing onto the gravel drive and the Princess Royal, hair in its familiar French roll, hatbox on the back seat, morning briefing balanced on her knee, is already rehearsing names she will greet, facts she will quote, and subtle jokes she might deploy to disarm an anxious host. This routine, repeated hundreds of times a year, is as ingrained as the beat of her heart. In 2024 that routine produced numbers so eye-watering that even hardened palace statisticians did a double-take. 474 engagements in 12 months. 10 overseas trips ranging from Caribbean hurricane relief inspections to somber battlefield commemorations on the Western Front. A scatter of county shows, ploughing championships, charity AGMs, investiture stand-ins, military anniversaries, lighthouse reopenings, wildlife rehabilitation launches and, squeezed between them, the bread-and-butter ribbon cuttings of dozens of tiny organizations whose names rarely make the court circular. When the totals were tallied on New Year's Eve, Princess Anne had outpaced every other working royal by a margin of 145 events, including her elder brother the King, who must juggle state papers and cancer treatments alongside 329 appearances. Staff applauded, commentators praised her as the Iron Pony of the House of Windsor. Yet admiration carried an undercurrent of alarm. Anne would turn 75 in midsummer. No matter how stalwart her constitution, biology remains a ruthless bookkeeper, and it was Vice Admiral Sir Tim who most clearly heard the ticking clock beneath the cheers. Tim Lawrence has always been more ballast than spotlight, the naval officer who, after serving as equerry to Queen Elizabeth II, married the princess in a snow-flecked private ceremony at Crathy Kirk in 1992, then quietly devoted 3 decades to ensuring her relentless public sprint never became a stumble. He knows the drill, knows that his wife's refusal to cancel an appointment, however minor, is part promise, part creed. He also knows that the price extracted by the schedule is cumulative and hidden until suddenly it is not. In June last year he watched her fall from a startled horse, suffer a concussion and a minor eye injury, and still argue to return to duty within a fortnight. Doctors prevailed, grounding her for 10 days, but the episode rang like a low-frequency alarm in Tim's mind. Since then, palace sources say, he has set himself an unofficial mission: wrestle at least a fragment of balance back into his wife's calendar before the accelerated pace becomes irreversible damage. The struggle plays out in the most mundane of arenas, the weekly diary meeting. Around an oak table in St. James's Palace sit the princess, her private secretary, an assistant press secretary, a lady-in-waiting, a senior equerry and, more recently, Sir Tim himself. Sheets of A4 marked with engagements spill across the polished surface. The private secretary suggests ring-fencing a Sunday for rest, and counters that a mountain rescue team in Cumbria has been waiting since lockdown for her visit and she cannot in good conscience delay further. The press aide proposes trimming a midweek northern swing from 4 events to 3, and reminds them that the village hall on the list received lottery funding partly because she pledged to open it. The equerry frowns over rail timetables and travel miles, and suggests simply departing 5 minutes earlier. And whenever stalemate looms, Sir Tim steps in, not as a scolding husband but as the voice of experience. "If we're out until 11 on Friday night then back in the car at 5 Saturday morning," he says, tone courteous but firm, "we run the risk of fatigue before the charity polo starts. Might we move the regimental dinner by a day?" Sometimes she accepts, sometimes she does not, but his presence has become both shield and lever, a protective force none of the staff can match. One longtime aide recalls an exchange that crystallized the tug-of-war. It was autumn, diary heaving, and the princess had just agreed to present service medals on the only free Saturday remaining that month. The aide ventured, with respect, that will be your third weekend away in a row. Anne's answer was classic, better 3 medals in deserving hands than another Saturday gardening. The aide, exasperated, murmured that he would face a rocket from Sir Tim on Monday morning. Anne paused, eyes glinting, and for once capitulated. Very well, she said, not without humour, tell the regiment I'll see them next quarter, and remind me to plant bulbs on Saturday. It was one of the first tangible victories for the Admiral's quiet campaign. That campaign has broadened into what palace insiders now call the Gatcom Clause. The idea is simple. After any fortnight containing more than 10 engagements, the princess must spend at least 48 consecutive hours on her home estate, free of official duties, allowing mind and body to reset among the whispering beech woods and the familiar clop of horses on gravel. Implementation is trickier. Invitations pour in by the dozen, the king's slimline monarchy relies on Anne's willingness to plug gaps, and the princess remains stubbornly allergic to anything resembling self-indulgence. Tim's strategy, therefore, is persuasion by stealth. He reminds her that the grandchildren, Zara's children MIA, Lena and Lucas, and Peter Phillips's girls Savannah and Isla, treasure days when Granny is simply the brisk figure teaching them to muck out a stable or roast marshmallows over an open brazier. He produces veterinary reports showing one of her beloved fell ponies benefits from her personal exercise sessions. He suggests that an unhurried afternoon sorting the estate's ancient carriage harnesses is, in fact, a duty to heritage. And, crucially, he lobbies other senior royals to shoulder their share. The Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh have already agreed to absorb 2 military patronages. The Prince of Wales will deputise for and at certain investitures, letting her cede ceremonies without disappointing recipients. The king, for his part, has offered gentle encouragement. Charles knows better than anyone the potent sense of obligation that drives his sister. He also knows the optics. If headlines begin to feature phrases like exhausted Princess Royal, public confidence in the pared-down roster of working Windsor's risks collapse. Privately, he has told advisers that Anne is the engine room of his reign, but even engines require maintenance. So he has instructed the Lord Chamberlain's office to assign an extra deputy to the princess's team, freeing her senior private secretary to negotiate fuller buffers between engagements. Whether Anne will embrace this reinforced safety net remains uncertain. Her default answer to offers of assistance is thank you, but unnecessary. The wider court watches all this with a mixture of admiration and unease. They know that the monarchy's soft power resides not merely in pageantry but in constant, low-level presence across the nation, cutting ribbons in small towns, lending gravitas to local charities, shaking the hand of a lifelong volunteer who never expected royal attention. Remove Anne's relentless ground coverage and the diary develops holes through which public goodwill might seep. Yet every system has a breaking point. Where that point lies for a 75-year-old whose younger colleagues already struggle to match her pace is a question courtiers hope never to test through crisis. For now, the compromise seems to hold. Early drafts of Anne's 2025 calendar show a reduction to roughly 400 engagements, still formidable, but leaving 1 in every 5 weekends clear. January's hard frost found her at home grooming a new Connemara gelding rather than christening a lifeboat. February's half-term saw her teaching Lucas Tyndall the difference between haylage and meadow hay rather than touring an NHS research wing. She grumbled, of course, but friends detect a subtle easing in her shoulders, a fresh sparkle when she returns to the road after a genuine pause. Sir Tim notes the change with quiet satisfaction and perhaps a touch of relief. The rocket no longer needs firing quite so often. Their marriage, so often overlooked in the glare of flashier royal unions, quietly underpins this evolution. Tim and Anne share a humour as dry as winter bracken, a relish for efficiency, and an unspoken agreement that personal fuss is intolerable unless it enables public service. At dinner they debrief with naval brevity, what worked, what misfired, where the next potential storm lies. But they also allow themselves moments of easy silence, the sort forged only when 2 people have grown comfortable navigating the same weather for decades. Those moments, Tim believes, are as vital to Anne's resilience as any official rest day. Will the Princess Royal truly slow? Friends think not. Slowing is simply not wired into her nature. Yet they also admit she has begun to count her steps more deliberately, to accept that breathers can amplify, rather than diminish, her impact. A patron who turns up well-rested listens better, jokes more freely, remembers names more precisely. It is a lesson even and who sets the bar for diligence can embrace. And if occasionally she still tries to cram 3 county visits and 2 dinners into a single Saturday, there is now a respected vice admiral ready to fold his arms, raise an eyebrow and suggest, in the gentlest tones, that the world will still turn if one ribbon waits a fortnight. The princess pretends to scowl, then concedes, and somewhere inside the palace a diary clerk marks a precious white square, small proof that even iron ponies, guided by steady hands, will occasionally choose the pasture over the parade ground. As the sun sinks behind Gatcombe's wooded ridge line, lambs settle, the last geese wheel toward the lake, and the Princess Royal finally sets her portfolio aside. In the library she finds Tim flipping through a worn naval logbook. He glances up. All done. She nods, pours them both a whiskey, and for one evening at least, the engine room rests while the watchful navigator stands content, knowing that tomorrow's tide will come soon enough.